All right, good evening, Saints fans and Who-Dats from all over the world. This is Kyle T. Mosley of the Crescent City Connection, bringing to you tonight's preview of the Panthers versus New Orleans Saints Wildcard Game 2018, guys. Can you believe it? And Happy New Year to everyone in the Who-Dat Nation listening to our podcast this evening. I am here with Canal Street Chronicles writer, Mr. Bob Rose. What's going on, Bob?
Not a lot at all, Kyle. I hope you and everybody in Who-Dat Nation had a great New Year. And we're going to get our New Year's kicked off in style this weekend with our first playoff appearance in 4 years.
Yeah, can you believe that? The New Orleans Saints are returning to the playoffs. We have not been too playoff ready in the past 79 years that we have had in the Who-Dat Nation. But the Saints ended the season with a loss against Tampa Bay on Sunday, 31-24. And that was a game, Bob, that I believe the Saints, I think they had to win it for a number of reasons. I want to pick your brain a little bit later, but don't forget to go to www.saintsnewsnetwork.com to read up on the New Orleans Saints with Barry Hurstis and his articles on a daily basis. Barry has been under the weather the past couple of days, so you haven't had many updates recently, but he plans to have a playoff preview for you guys to be able to review. And you can also check out us on www.saintsnews.net. All of the latest in these Who-Dat Nation and all the info on the black and gold right there in one spot, 24/7. All right, Bob, man, we I don't think we're limping into the playoffs, but that game against Tampa Bay gave me some concern. Jameis Winston was able to drive the Tampa Bay Bucks down the field in the last minutes of the game. The Tampa Bay Bucks in the last seconds of the game came away with a touchdown on the Saints. How do you feel about what occurred, especially those last 4 and 10 minutes of the game?
I'll tell you what, it's not so much that they lost the game. I think that would have been bad enough because, like you alluded to, Kyle, the Saints coming into the weekend needed to win the game or root for, and I'll, cough, cough, root for Atlanta to beat Carolina. And either of those scenarios would have given the New Orleans the NFC South title. And just the fact that we had to rely on Atlanta to win any game whatsoever makes you feel a little bit queasy to your stomach. But, all that aside, like I started to say, it's not so much that they lost the game, it's the way they lost the game. And every single thing that happened during the game were problems that the team never got themselves away from during the course of the year. They gave up a long drive in, literally the final seconds of the game to Jameis Winston and a talented Tampa Bay offense. I mean, let's give them credit. But still, we expected more from this New Orleans defense, particularly the pass defense, during the course of the year. And I'm not sure what happened there, but that's definitely something to be concerned about. Untimely penalties and untimely turnovers doom this team as well. And it seems like this is a weekly refrain here on this show, as well as other publications. The fact that the Saints, beyond a very talented trio in Michael Thomas and Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, they really don't have anybody for Drew Brees to utilize in key situations. So if those guys get shut down, or even it's difficult to shut them down, but even if they get limited, the Saints' offense therefore becomes limited. And I mean, all those things combined, not to mention, and I've heard a couple viewers and readers of all of our different work, Barry's and yours and myself, and the Canal Street Chronicles pieces. I've heard fans show some concern that maybe the injuries are starting to catch up with this defense, and we're starting to see the lack of depth really rear its ugly head, and there could be no worse time for that to happen. Does that mean that this team is doomed going into this game against Carolina? Absolutely not. But the New Orleans Saints certainly gave us some cause for concern with, again, the way that they lost this game.
Yeah, that's really what I was more concerned about. And it wasn't all that surprised, to be honest with you guys. When I saw Tommy Lee, and it was, I don't know what it was, Bob, but when he got that ball, I just had a feeling something doom-like was going to happen, man. And, and it came true. And because even if you watch the slow-mo of him going down to the ground, I'm thinking, why wouldn't you keep both hands on the football going to the ground or getting your knee to the ground? He released his left hand to brace himself from falling, and that just gave more opportunity for that ball to be stripped, man. So it just, when you look at what really happened and went down on Sunday, it could do one or two things. It could really wake these guys up a little bit to say, all right, Tampa Bay was one of those teams that we knew we should have won the game without all the drama that we went through, right? But since we did go through all the drama, could it be that it's going to give us more opportunity to really be on heightened enlightenment going into these playoffs, knowing that we can't make these same mistakes? What's your thoughts?
I think, both points are great, from your perspective. But I think just looking at this team and the way that they have been coached and performed this year, I would certainly like to think that your latter point is closer to the truth, that this might be a slap in the face for them. And, these young guys and the coaches are going to get in the ear of these young guys and say, okay, guys, this was proof positive that you cannot take anything for granted, not with where our talent level is right now, and just not in this league in general. Nothing can ever be taken for granted. You have to earn it. You have to take it. You can't just step out on the field and win a game because you're the New Orleans Saints. That's just not going to happen. Particularly in the playoffs, and now that we're going against a very seasoned playoff team in Carolina, you can better believe that the coaches are pounding that in the ear of these young guys and the veterans on this Saints roster, the Max Ungers, the Drew Breeses, the couple of guys on the team, the Thomas Morsteads that have been there before. They're constantly in the ear, I got to believe anyway, that they're constantly in the ear of these young guys, telling them what to expect. And, hey, use this as a learning experience. Yes, we lost the game to Tampa, but it really ended up being no harm, no foul, because we still got the division title thanks to a little bit of help. We're at home because of it, so you're going to have that raucous Superdome crowd in our corner. So I think all those things are going to play together and hopefully make this Saints squad a little bit more motivated than what we saw out of the Tampa Bay game this past Sunday.
Yeah, motivated is what we need. We need to have what you say, some complementary factors in other than the Kamara, the Michael Thomas and Mark Ingram supporting Drew Brees, because we need to have Josh Hill. We need to have Ginn. We need to have somebody else stepping up. And Brandon Coleman, please, after those fumbles against the Jets games, you have been non-existent all in the Saints offense, man. We really need to have all hands on deck. But it's a theme that has really been reoccurring, even though that the Saints offense continually, even in my opinion, when we haven't played up to the consistency that I would like to see the offense play up to, they still are second in total yardage for the NFL. And that's amazing to me, Bob. I mean, think about it. Drew Brees didn't have to throw 5,000 yards this season. And look where this team that Sean Payton and those guys have put together is fielding some pretty good numbers this season.
Oh, that's a great point. And we've shown some concern about the offense many times, even on this show. The fact, and we keep coming back to the complementary weapons or the lower third down conversion, much lower third down conversion percentage than what we're used to seeing. But again, the bottom line is that they are second in total yards, and they have a top 5 passing offense and a top 5 rushing offense. There's only one other team in the league that has that combination this year. We've already faced them in the Los Angeles Rams. And the points. I mean, we're not just talking a team in New Orleans that's driving down the field and coming up empty. They've averaged 28 points per game, which is 4th in the NFL. So yeah, I mean, they're on paper they're definitely a well-rounded bunch. And maybe we're being a little bit too critical. Maybe we have been spoiled by the success of the Drew Brees, Sean Payton passing offense during their time here in New Orleans. And I do think that there is something to that. But like you just said, Drew hasn't thrown for 5,000 yards this year because he hasn't had to throw for 5,000 yards. And, maybe the rest of us and our mentality, our visual and perspective mentality, just hasn't caught up with that. Sean Payton and Pete Carmichael probably feel a lot more comfortable with what they have than maybe what we do. And I'd rather my coach feel comfortable in the offensive game plan than me feel comfortable with the offensive game plan.
Yeah, definitely, man. It makes sense all in all. But one thing that was kind of concerning to me is when the Saints had the football with 4 minutes left, we did not run enough time off that clock. And we did not pick up the first downs that we needed to pick up. Those are the inconsistencies and some of the things that give me some caution headed into what's going to happen against not only if we defeat Carolina, but we've got to really be better on third down, man. That third down effort from the New Orleans Saints has been our Achilles heel for 2018. What are your thoughts? What could be some of the things we can do to remedy those situations, especially going into the playoffs?
Well, we've seen it a little bit over the second half of the season. The Saints offense is utilizing Kamara now a lot more than just out of the backfield. We're seeing him, used in the passing game a lot more, and a lot more than just a screen or a check down option. They're moving him around like a number 2 or a number 3 wide receiver, which in passing situations, that's honestly what Alvin Kamara is now. And honestly, I mean, you look at Kamara's numbers, and you have no choice. You realize you have to get him the football. Now, opposing defenses, and especially one as good as Carolina, are obviously going to realize that too. So in big situations, you're going to put your best guys and extra guys on both Kamara and Thomas because those are your third down guys. So again, it comes around full vicious circle to we need another guy to step up, whether it's Brandon Coleman or whether it's Josh Hill. I mean, think of how many times during Brees' career that he has been reliant on the tight end position for a big third down conversion, be it Jeremy Shockey or Jimmy Graham or Ben Watson. They tried to utilize Kobe Fleener last year, and honestly, they had some success. I know people were down on Fleener and his overall statistics, but when he was in the lineup last year, the Saints were number 1 in third down conversion. He's been out of the lineup for the second half of the year, and not that the Saints were lighting up the world with third down percentage in the first half of the year, but if you look over the first half statistics, third down wise are a lot better than what they've been since Fleener has been out of the lineup. Right. So as we keep talking about the injuries thinning out the defensive unit, it's thinned out the offensive unit a little bit too, because with Fleener being out, nobody else has stepped up to take those reins. So we need somebody to step up.
Yeah, we do, man, and I think this is going to be a good game for Ted Ginn to really step up. But we need to have Willie Snead to be that guy on third down. We really do need to have Willie Snead to be able to step it up, man. Because, all season long, he's just been, how do I phrase it? More like a character figure in the offense versus that character it just doesn't seem like he's been able to acclimate himself well coming from that suspension and the hamstring injury.
No, and you were a lot kinder in your description of Snead's season than I would have been. I have called him the Invisible Man. I have called him, and I stand by this, I have called him the biggest disappointment of the 2017-2018 New Orleans Saints. And it's a complete mystery to us all. His first 2 seasons, he was a key third down target. He was a key option in Drew Brees' progression, and he had nearly 1,000 yards each of the last 2 seasons. If you're a fantasy football player, if you're a fantasy football player, I apologize if you drafted Willie Snead on your team this year, because he has been a colossal disappointment, and he didn't even look right in the preseason, to be honest with you. But like we just said, nearly 1,000 yards and a key figure in the New Orleans offense for 2 seasons running. His totals this year: 8 catches, 92 yards, and 0 touchdowns. That's a good game for Michael Thomas. That's Snead's season numbers. Why? I don't understand what has happened to him. And you would figure he would have played a bigger role in the passing game with the team having traded Brandon Cooks. I really didn't think for 1 minute that when New Orleans signed Ted Ginn, that he would have the type of season that he has had, and thank God he has, because I expected the type of season that we got from Michael Thomas. But I expected Snead to step up in the role and finally break through that 1,000-yard barrier and maybe even flirt with 90 catches, 95 catches in his own right. And obviously, if I was a betting man and laid down some money on those numbers, I'd be living out on the street right now.
Yeah, man. Well, Willie, you got to come play, baby. We need Big Willie Snead to come. Little Big Willie Snead. How about that? To show up in the game on Sunday. Let's talk a little bit about Kamara, man. And golly, and we're going to talk about Mark Ingram and then Drew Brees, but what do you say about this young man? He has been voted for the 7th time this season. That's right, 7 times. God, I mean, that's just mind-boggling right there. 7 times Rookie of the Week in the National Football League. Some guys are just able to get mentioned on the roll, but 7 times, Bob. How can we not say this gentleman is going to be the Rookie of the Year? I know Kareem Hunt had a very strong ending to his season, but wow, he hasn't been voted 7 times.
No, he hasn't, and Kareem Hunt. You're right. He has had a good season, a very good season by rookie standards. But what Kamara has done is just so far heads and shoulders above what Kareem Hunt has done, or any other rookie for that matter has done in the National Football League, not only this season, but in a very long time. The kid is a threat to take the ball all the way every time he gets his hands on the ball. And we just talked a few minutes ago about how he has become the number 2 receiver on this offense. He has 81 catches on the season. 81 catches for a running back. You don't see that very often, especially when you already have a guy in Michael Thomas that has over 104 receptions. Kamara and Thomas are the only 2 players that have over 100 targets in the passing game. Kamara has exactly 100 on the nose, and now that they're starting to utilize him more in the kick return game, and by the way, especially after Tommy Lee's goof ups in the last couple of weeks, I fully expect to see Kamara returning punts into this playoff game as well. So the kid can literally do it all. I don't see how you don't give him not only Offensive Rookie of the Year, but overall Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, definitely needs to be in that mention as Rookie of the Year. The one thing that really is surprising to me is the fact that he and Marshawn Lattimore have just acclimated themselves so well to this team that we can see the building blocks with him, Ramchak as well, and the other rookies and a couple of the young men who have been placed on IR for the season, as well as Marcus Williams, man. We really should be excited what is to come for the New Orleans Saints and building on guys like Kamara and the rest of this team. Good young talent to build on, man. Let me ask you this, man. We're going into uncharted territory, so to speak. And when I mean uncharted territory, how can the Saints come away with a win with defeating a team twice already and now seeing them for a third time in the playoffs? Now, hasn't that been done before?
Yeah, it has been done, and I saw an article, I believe it was on ESPN.com. It was either this morning or yesterday morning, and that it's actually more common than what we realize or what we talk about. I think 13 out of the last 20 times, it said the article, that a team that had beaten a playoff opponent twice during the regular season, 13 out of the last 20 times, they have won the third matchup. So I like those statistics. But I'm like you, and we sort of touched on it last week when we were talking about preferences on who we would rather face in the first round. And it seems to me, and both you and I, Kyle, and Barry Hurstis, if you're listening too, I know you are, we're all kind of football historians. And traditionally, it has been very difficult to beat a team three times in the same season. And I think the primary reason for that is, of course, if you've already played them twice, that means you're divisional rivals. So you not only are familiar with each other during that season, but oftentimes the coaching staffs are familiar with the other's tendencies. Individual players and game plans are familiar with each other's tendencies. So that always makes it. That's why playing in any divisional game always makes it more difficult than when you play, say, an interconference game, or even within your own conference, just because of the number of times that you see each other during the course of the season, and the fact that when you are preparing your team in the off season and through training camp. You are preparing them, Sean Payton and his staff, for example, they are preparing their basic game planning for their divisional rivals. Because if you win, if you have a winning record in your division, obviously that gets you one major step closer to the playoffs. So it's not only, again, just familiar with each other, it's that your entire base game plan on both sides of the ball is set around the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. So it's obviously and they're doing the same thing to you. So it's obviously going to be very difficult to go on any kind of winning streak against a team in that kind of situation. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, definitely, man. And when I look at this game, Bob, knowing the tendencies, like you said, knowing the intimate nuances of the game as well as the hatred they have for one another, it's going to come down to what? Turnovers, mistakes, special teams, all these things, man. It's going to be a battle, man. It's going to be one of those battles that we really need to have these guys to really limit any of the mistakes coming down the stretch, especially that third and fourth quarter of the game, man. And we got to set the tone early on how this game is going to be played. So look at the defense. Cam Jordan, who is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate as well. Who else on the defense other than he and Marshawn Lattimore, of course, need to really play a solid game?
Craig Robertson. Craig Robertson is one of my defensive keys for New Orleans this week. And the reason that is, and again, it boils down to how familiar you are with a divisional rival. They know what Carolina brings to the table offensively, and they aren't going to threaten you a whole lot in the passing game as long as you control their running game. and you control their running game, all the props in the world to Jonathan Stewart. He's one heck of a running back and has had a great career. Christian McCaffrey and what's his name, Fozzie Whitaker. They're both talented running backs as well. But that running game goes through Cam Newton and the physicality. And the reason why Craig Robertson is my key is he is the Saints' most athletic linebacker remaining on the active roster anyway. So he's probably going to be charged with the responsibility of, what we call a spy on Cam. And when they do that read option, Robertson is going to be the key, in addition to defensive line penetration, but we'll get into that in a minute. Cam Newton, I expect he'll drop when he does drop back to pass in a traditional set. He's only going to take one or two reads, and then he's going to take off and run. And that's where the term spy comes into play. As you know, I'm just explaining this to some of our viewers that might not know the terminology. Right. When you're facing a mobile quarterback, you're going to use, sometimes it's a safety, but most of the time it's one of your athletic linebackers to literally spy on this mobile quarterback and to kind of shadow him. So that way, if Cam Newton does tuck the ball under and run, hopefully Robertson is going to read him properly and stop it for a minimal gain, rather than let Newton loose in the secondary, because that could be a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah, the one thing that really gives me some encouragement about Robertson is how well, I think he's had a very, very solid, I would say, month, the past month, filling in for A.J. Klein. I think Manti Te'o has had an outstanding several games recently as well. So looking at those two guys really gives me some encouragement on how the team is going to play. The one thing that really gives me some concern is how the team has had some trouble against the run. Where can the team be able to reinforce how they play the run on Sunday?
I think it starts with the defensive tackles, not only on this New Orleans defense, but against the style of running game that Carolina likes to bring. They are a physical team, as we know, on both sides of the football. And their running game, I know the read option, with Cam gets a lot of attention. They don't run that as much as they used to, but they still can rely on it if it starts to have some early success. But even the read option, it starts with an inside look. Cam will take the ball, and he takes an instant look over the defense, and he has a running back coming on an inside rush. In most cases, it's Jonathan Stewart, and Cam makes an instant decision on how the defense is lined up with the blocking assignments on whether to hand the ball to Stewart or to fake it to him and take off around the end. So if you have good defensive line penetration, especially from defensive tackles, they're able to disrupt that interior line blocking, and they can just not only disrupt but destroy any kind of read option attack, shift them into a more traditional attack. And as good as Jonathan Stewart is, he doesn't have the wheels to get outside like he used to. And I think the Saints defense as a whole, especially Cam Jordan and Craig Robertson, like we just talked about, they are definitely more athletic than, say, a Jonathan Stewart, so they can shut down that outside run. But to contain Carolina's running game, it has to start from the inside out. You have to win the battles between the tackles, or specifically between the two guards in the center position. You have to win those battles. Yeah,
you got to win those battles. You got to be solid in your approach. And I just think, all in all, man, I think the team is going to really put a good defensive presence out there. I look at the safeties. I look at the safety play recently of Von Bell, and I know Raphael Bush has stepped in, as well as Marcus Williams. They're going to have to really pay attention to Funches on Sunday. And I know sometimes Crawley could be a little bit overzealous in his approach, but that's just how he plays his game, right? And you got to have a cornerback that has the swagger, and I believe both he as well as Lattimore do have that. But the safety play is going to be very critical against the run as well as against the defense. Now, the one person that was of concern to me defensively playing the nickel was P.J. Williams. Did you see the missed tackle he had there? I mean, just laying a shoulder on the guy and having him to pick up the first down, that tight end?
Yeah, I did, and that was his worst play of the game. But PJ had an awful game against Tampa Bay. I tend to give out in my post-game articles, if the Saints win, I'll give out game balls. If they lose, I just do a general analysis. But if I were to give out my a GOAT of the game award, it would have been to P.J. Williams this past Sunday. And P.J.'s generally had a decent season, nothing close to the kind of exploits we've seen from Crawley or especially from Lattimore. But P.J. is a solid number 3 cornerback. But when he plays poorly, as we have seen a number of times this year, he can really be a flat-out liability for this defense. His tackling was poor. His angles in coverage and in approaching tackles, it was poor against Tampa. He definitely has to clean that up going into this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. He does have to clean that up, man. But, I think the coaches are going to be there to school them, and they've been doing a very good job. Dennis Allen has done a very good job, especially with the halftime adjustments with the defense, especially if they have suffered some poor play during the game. Now, we face Cam Newton, and I know you mentioned these other young men, but McCaffrey and Cam Newton, in my opinion, are going to be the two individuals the Saints are going to have to key on, and I think they're going to have to really pay attention to what's going to happen with McCaffrey. Being in that Superdome is going to give him a clean surface to be able to run and catching that ball out of the backfield. They've done an admirable job with him, but each of the past 2 times they faced him, they gave up a touchdown. How do you see that matchup with the linebackers against McCaffrey really going to sell out on Sunday?
That's about the only area of Carolina's offense that New Orleans does not match up well against. There is Christian McCaffrey, especially on the fast track of the Superdome. Just a real quick stat rundown of Christian. He had 80 receptions for the Panthers this year, their leading receiver. In addition to I know he had well over 400 yards on the ground as well. So not nearly the statistics that we've seen from our guy in Kamara, but he is quite clearly their top receiving threat. And they're starting to move him around their formation as well, more than just out of the backfield. They'll move him over into the slot and something like, and places like that. And he didn't have a lot of success running the ball against New Orleans in either meeting this year, like you said. But he had some receiving success. I believe it was in the first game, the one played in Carolina, he actually had over 100 yards receiving.
Yeah.
And like you said, Kyle, he had a touchdown in each game. So that he's going to provide a difficult matchup for the Saints defense, especially since we know that Dennis Allen does prefer to play man-to-man coverage with Crawley and Lattimore. And I guess if Crawley and Lattimore can control their men, can kind of shut them down without help, that does allow the Saints to bring over a safety for extra help, especially when McCaffrey lines up in the slot. I think it's coming out of the backfield that is going to be a bigger problem because, again, we mentioned Craig Robertson. If he's going to be spying on Cam Newton, that means he might be a step slow getting outside on McCaffrey, which leaves your other linebacking option in covering McCaffrey out of the backfield is most likely Manti Te'o. Mm-hmm. And Te'o's had a good season, don't get me wrong, but he's more of a run support guy. I do not want Manti Te'o in coverage, especially against McCaffrey. So I'll be interested to see how the Saints, what kind of game plan that Dennis Allen comes up with to contain McCaffrey.
Yeah, that's the one concern I have with with the New Orleans Saints is how they're going to play McCaffrey, much like how the New Orleans Saints play Alvin Kamara on offense. Let's kind of flip the script here, man, and let's go back to Mark Ingram. How do you think Ingram can be effective against that very tough defensive line that Carolina has?
Well, New Orleans has to win the battle up front, just like defensively. The key to beating a very physical Carolina defense is offensive line success, and especially in the running game. And Ingram had a decent performance against Carolina this year. I mean, remember in the second game, everybody talks about Kamara's breakaway ability. Mark Ingram has underrated speed in the open field.
Yeah.
He's not traditionally known as a game breaker, but he busted a 72-yard run against Carolina in the second matchup, in the Superdome matchup this year. And he's had a couple nice long runs or nice games against them throughout his career. I think with Ingram against a defense like Carolina, you have to keep feeding him the ball. Sean Payton in general has to be patient with the running game with both of his running backs, and realizing that they're going to start breaking the bigger gains in the second half. Kamara and Ingram are both tremendous cutback runners. So if the offensive line can keep those cutback lanes clear up front, not only win their initial battles, but make sure that there's another lane for these two talented running backs to cut back in. And don't get me wrong, I respect Carolina's front seven as much as anybody's in the league. But the Saints offensive line had a lot of success against the Panthers in both meetings this year. I like the matchup that Mark Ingram has in the running game. I think he's going to get some yards this game.
Yeah, and the key is what you said is can Sean Payton be patient? The Saints, when we won the Super Bowl, we fielded the sixth top-rated rushing attack. This season, guys, number 5 with Alvin Kamara as well as Mark Ingram. That season when we won the Super Bowl, we had a 3-headed Hydra back there with Reggie Bush, Bell, as well as Pierre Thomas. But this season, man, these young men, Ingram and Kamara, both of them accounted for over 1,500 yards total from scrimmage. I think that's the second time that has happened in NFL history as well, right?
Yeah, it is. I'd read somewhere that they actually surpassed the NFL record set by the Cleveland Browns duo of Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner, and it was either 1985 or 86.
Wow,
and both of those backs rushed for over 1,000 yards. I think Kamara and Ingram are the best running back duo in the NFL, and Mark Ingram is in his prime right now, and we still have this. What's scary is that Kamara is only a rookie, like you said earlier, and how much better he can get once he knows NFL defense is a little bit better. And God, this duo can be downright frightening.
Yeah. Bam, slam, whatever you want to call them, flash, lightning. I mean, they are putting it to the National Football League, but we're down to where in the playoffs everything is a little bit more tense, right? Everything has a little bit more finality to it because either you win or you go home and you go fishing with Charles Barkley like he would do for the NBA guys, right? So we don't want to be home too early, especially with this Arctic blast that's come through our area. It's more like go ice fishing down here in the South, but we don't want that to happen, man. Look what's happened to the Saints, Bob. This year has kind of evolved. I know our first game was a Monday Night Football game, right? And we really didn't have too many other prime time games other than the Thursday night game with the Atlanta Falcons that I can recall. But now the Saints on Sunday prime time is going to be like the game of the week, but because it's the only game out there, the later game. But wow, the Saints are going to be the last game of the week in determining if we're going to be one of the NFC South teams to be able to move on, because like it or not, two of those teams are going to lose. In my opinion, I don't think Atlanta's going to beat the Rams. How do you see that one?
I actually think Atlanta can beat the Rams.
Do you?
Really? Yeah, I do. And I hope it doesn't. Well, wow. If you're a New Orleans fan, I think you almost have to not have to root for Atlanta. But you have to recognize the possibility that the Falcons have a talented enough roster to go into, even on the road, and go into Los Angeles and beat the Rams. Now, the Rams have been downright impressive this year, at times scary. But the reason that I think Atlanta can beat the Rams is actually the same reason why I think New Orleans could lose to Carolina, and that's this. You look at the rosters of the Rams and the Saints both, and they are extremely young teams. Look beyond the veteran leadership of Breeze and Max Unger, who has been to a Super Bowl with Seattle, won a Super Bowl with Seattle before. And there isn't, Cam Jordan and Mark Ingram, Thomas Morstead. They've appeared in some playoff games too. Thomas Morstead's the only one left from the Super Bowl winning team other than Breeze, but. The rest of this team is extremely young, and this is the first time that they're going to be experiencing the playoffs, where things are ratcheted up, 10 times its normal level of magnitude. Therefore, problems can begin to snowball, even when you're at home. And both Carolina and Atlanta, they're both playoff season teams. Carolina more so than Atlanta, but we know the success that the Falcons have had last year. And like it or not, the Falcons played solid football down the stretch of the season. It looked like that they finally woke up from their Super Bowl hangover, or whatever you want to call it. There's still some holes on that team, but I don't think that they are going to think twice about stepping into someone else's stadium, like the Los Angeles Rams, and not thinking that they don't have a chance. I think the Rams will win that game, but I would not surprise me one bit if the Falcons pulled off an upset.
Yeah, well, you make a good point. Now, let's look at what could possibly happen. If the Falcons go ahead and they pull up the upset, right? Pull off the upset, I should say. And then they go to Philadelphia, they could be able to pull off another upset there, because I think Philadelphia is primed to just fall. After they have been, losing Wentz has really set that team back, man. And I know Foles did pretty well those first two games, but these last two have been stinkers. So I think those guys are primed to fall, man. And let's say on the flip side, let's say the Saints defeat Carolina, then we go to the Vikings, and believe it or not, I believe the Vikings are primed to fall as well, man.
So do I.
And let's say that could be a showdown in the Superdome to face the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC Championship game. Wow. Wouldn't that be awesome?
I was thinking about that last Sunday night, too. And I got to admit, I started grinning ear to ear. I mean, I was ticked off at the Tampa Bay loss. Sick to my stomach that I had to root for Atlanta to win any game whatsoever. But then I realized the possibility that you just laid out there, and it's an extremely real possibility. And to host an NFC Championship game in the Superdome, and to have your most bitter rival coming into town with the right to go to the Super Bowl. Oh my God! I mean, first of all, we as New Orleans Saints fans and people that that kind of cover the team, we already know the kind of trash talking that goes on in a normal regular season game between the two fan bases. I can only imagine what would happen in that scenario.
Look, man, if in that scenario, do you not think that Superdome? I know it was rocking 2 Sundays ago against the Falcons, but that dome will be off the hook, and it will be an exciting game. It will be a game. I think it could be one of those epic games that we play against the Falcons.
Yeah, it absolutely could. I mean, you remember people still talk about the 1991, well, it was the 91 season, I believe the 92 wild card game, against the Falcons, where they did come into the Superdome and beat a favored Saints team. And a lot of us, shall we say, seasoned Saints fans, we still remember that game with a bitter taste in our mouth. And yeah, I absolutely agree. An NFC championship, I mean, that's something you can hold over your rival's head for the rest of their lives if you're a fan. I don't care. The kind of thing, well, I don't care if we go 1-15 next year and you go 15-1. We still beat you in the NFC championship game. I mean, that's the kind of thing that would live on forever.
Yeah, definitely. And, as much as we try to stick it to one another, we have to respect the fact that talent is on the other side of the football. Especially, we respect the fact that the Panthers have a great talented team in Cam Newton, as well as having Kuechly as well as Davis on the other side. So we're not taking anything for granted, because every one of these teams that earned, and I have to repeat, earned the right to be in the playoff system for 2018 have talent. So when I say anything negative about the Vikings or the Eagles, as they could be able to potentially fall, yeah, but still, they have some very good defensive players out there on both of those teams as well, and we have to respect that. All right, man. Let me ask you this, coaching wise, the matchup against Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, as they would call him, and the gunslinger extraordinaire, Mr. Sean Payton. Do you think there's a chance that Sean Payton will become a little bit impatient if he doesn't see the team progressing the first couple of drives?
You and I both know the answer to that question, and the answer to that question is yes. Sean Payton can absolutely become impatient. Yeah. Sean Payton's biggest battle week to week is not whether he can out-scheme the opposing coach. Sean Payton's biggest battle week to week is versus Sean Payton. Yeah. He likes to pass the ball. He likes to spread the ball around to multiple targets, during the course of a game or during the course of a season. And I mean, his offense is successful. You cannot argue with the results. But this is a different Saints team, as you and I keep pointing out. And this is the type of Saints team that you might not. You probably shouldn't expect to come out of the first quarter with a 28-0 lead, like you have with some more explosive teams in the past. You might have to be content with a 3-0 or a 7-3 lead, and you build momentum as the game goes along. And you cannot build momentum if you're constantly going 3 and out, because you're not relying on what your offensive strengths are, which is Ingram, Kamara, and quick, short slants, and one-on-one matchups with Michael Thomas. Despite the fact that we talk about how the complementary targets need to step up, your offense still goes through those 3 guys. And as soon as you start getting away from that and getting a little too cutesy, and Peyton has during the course of his career from time to time, you're immediately putting your entire playoff future in harm's way.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I think right now it's going to be, if he can be able to listen to Pete Carmichael and be willing to refrain from doing something really foolish early on. But I do have to say this. I think the Saints need to take a couple of more chances than they have been doing down the field. I think they've been a little bit too conservative. As well as, I believe, if Drew Brees just puts a little bit more air under the balls for Ted Ginn, because Drew, if you look at how he's so accurate in his passing, right? So Drew is trying to really target the ball in. Ginn is the type of receiver just kind of similar to how Chris Carter and Randy Moss were back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Give them some air under the ball to go get it. I think if he targets those down the field passes more like that, man, we could possibly have a couple more touchdowns on the board, man. I really do, because Ginn
I
is going to
agree. And Ginn has made a career out of being a big play threat and a big play specialist down the field. And look at the quarterbacks that he's had in his career. He's had quarterbacks like Cam Newton, or I believe Carson Palmer was the quarterback when he was in Arizona. We could go on and on. It's certainly not a who's who list of accurate quarterbacks in NFL history. But a lot of those guys just had a big arm. Whether it was accurate or not was another story, but just had a big arm. I think the comparison you made with Randy Moss is right on target. Now, we're not saying Ted Ginn is anything like Randy Moss, but as far as the type of skill level he has, you just heave the ball up and let your fastest guy and most athletic guy go get it. It's playground football 101. You run to the neighbor's yard and I'll throw it as far as I can.
Yeah. That's what we used to do on street ball in my days in Stephen Girard in New Orleans, Louisiana. That just throw it up, let me get it. So, let me ask you this, Bob, and we're coming down to who we put into the game, who we don't, who's going to be active, who's going to be inactive. Teron Armstead, man, that thigh injury, and you saw it when he was trying to chase down from that interception a couple of weeks ago against the Falcons. How do we see Teron Armstead in this game? Is he going to be available or what?
I don't know. I mean, I was just about to say 50-50. I think the way the Saints are talking and just acting, and the gut feeling I get is it's probably about a 60-40 chance that Armstead will play. But you raise a great point. If he does play, and he's a tough guy. I mean, if he can walk, he'll probably give it a go. But it's more than just stepping out on the field. The question becomes how effective can he be? And when he's been out of the lineup, the solution for the Saints has been pretty simple. They move Andrus Peat outside to left tackle and plug Calamete into Pete's left guard position. And the Saints offensive line is okay when that happens. But I was watching the Tampa Bay game pretty closely, and this has been a problem throughout Pete's career. The same thing that makes Andrus Peat a very, very good guard is the same thing that causes him to struggle outside at left tackle. He can, if he gets his arms on you, he's a phone booth guy. If you come within his radius, he could flatten you. Or if Andrus can manage to come straight ahead at you, he will flatten you. But if you have to make Pete move at all, I don't think he's the most nimble guy in the world. And he does struggle when you put a move or two on him at either one of the tackle positions that they've tried him at. Now, he's no longer a revolving door or a turnstile, as I've unfortunately called him in the past. He has solidified his blocking on the outside. But this Saints offensive line is so much better with even a reasonably healthy Armstead in at tackle, because you keep Pete at a more effective position inside at guard. Even though Senio has done a great job when he has stepped in this year, he's no Pete there. Pete's the better player there. That's why he's the starter. So we all need to keep our fingers crossed that Teron Armstead will be a healthy go for this game. Otherwise, that's going to be a position and an area of the offensive line that bears worth watching all day long.
Yeah, especially since we have an aggressive Julius Peppers coming off that side. You have those guys up front who are going to be coming at the team. What was kind of interesting to me, I saw a couple of clips earlier today from the NFL Network, how Kuechly was able to diagnose the plays the Saints were running pretty quick and being able to penetrate through the line and stop Kamara on a couple of instances. So already we have some bulletin material out there from Shaq Thompson saying that Kamara is going to feel it this time. And he said, I'm going to make sure I wrap up, and that's not going to be a need to do against our defense. So I'm like, okay, all right. So he says Kamara, he's going to be there to stop Kamara this time. So if these guys are going to key in on Kamara, that's why we need these other guys to be able to be there to kind of, I guess, not have them to put the full focus on the full guy that we're going to put into the system. Does that make sense? So we really need to have these other wide receivers being able to get open and find a way to get some separation. Remember that first game against Carolina, that's what was the problem in some of those drives. There was no separation going on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like you said, it doesn't have to be just one other guy. And we're not asking for Brandon Coleman or Josh Hill or any of those guys. We're not asking for them to have 10 catches or 180 yards or anything like that. We just need to play from them on third down. We just need to play from them near the red zone. Because I'll tell you that this is how it's affected the Saints offense. Drew Brees, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Drew Brees does not have confidence in those guys. In the past, and I hate to keep beating the drum of Sean Payton, ghost of Sean Payton, Drew Brees past, but it's relevant in this case. In the past, there were so many targets to spread the ball around to. A guy like Devery Henderson, for instance, he might only have 2 catches during the game, but one will be for a touchdown and the other would be for a key third down conversion. And it's the same with Robert Meacham, or someone like Lance Moore. He might have 6 catches, but they might only go for 44 yards. But guess what? 5 of those catches, they were conversions into from a third down to a first down, or a key short yardage touchdown conversion, something like that. That's what we're not getting from these guys. We don't need them to bust the fantasy numbers off the chart. We just need them to make an occasional play and let your Hall of Fame quarterback have some confidence in you. Because you look at Drew go through his progressions. He's not even looking in their direction anymore. It's Kamara, Thomas, and maybe a check down option to Ingram if that's there. And if none of those 3 are there immediately, Drew has always shown the capability. He'll go through 5 or 6 reads if the line will give him time, but he's not doing that now. He goes through the first 3, and then after that he holds on to the ball, and he either has to rush a throwaway or rush the ball into coverage, which fortunately has not resulted in many turnovers, but that could still spell trouble. And that's what this problem is. Their quarterback doesn't have confidence in him anymore.
Man, that doesn't bode well. It doesn't bode well, in my opinion. And I kind of sense that as well. The confidence is lacking, especially with the drops, the fumbles from Coleman. Tommy Lee has to be able to step up a little bit, man. Do you think Human is going to be available? I know the ankle was giving him some trouble.
I don't know, because they just re-signed John Phillips today.
Yeah,
I saw.
Yeah.
So I think that we'll probably see a situation. We'll know by Saturday. We'll get a better feel by, say, Saturday, whether Human is going to play or not. If he can't, Phillips is a pretty capable fill-in on the type of things that they had always asked Human to do. Phillips is a good, solid inline blocker. Drew has looked for him. Drew has looked for Phillips just like he did with Human on near the goal line if he had to. He's not afraid to look that direction. So I like the Phillips re-signing. But if you're a Human fan or expect him to suit up, I don't think that signing bodes well for number 84 to be back on the field for at least this game.
Yeah, I mean, concussions, man, golly. This league has been faced with some serious concussion issues this season alone, man. And look at our roster. We have, I believe, 14 guys that we have, or more, that we have to place on IR, more than any playoff team that is being fielded in the National Football League, and we still are producing. That gives me some encouragement as well. All right, so let's go ahead, Bob. Let's kind of break down our final analysis of what to expect for the fans going into this playoff game. We got Drew Brees. We got Cam Newton. We have Michael Thomas. We have Funches on the other side. We have Stewart and McCaffrey. We have Mark Ingram, and we have Kamara. Let's talk about the running backs. Who do you like and who do you favor in this matchup?
I like the Saints running backs. I don't see how you couldn't like the Saints running backs. They've already, we realize and, of course, respect what Carolina brings to the table defensively. But Ingram and Kamara and that line up front, they've already faced Carolina twice, and they've already had success on them against them both times. I know what Shaq Thompson said, and I kind of chuckled at that because especially in the second game in the Superdome, Kamara beat Thompson pretty handily on a couple of those pass routes or wheel routes coming out of the backfield. So my answer to Shaq Thompson is, yeah, and we know you guys can hit, but you got to catch him first, and I don't see you being able to do that. Right. I think Kamara just brings that added element that the Panthers can't match up with without sacrificing extra guys to do so and just clogging that inside or wherever Kamara is. And if you're going to do that, that's going to free open the field for Michael Thomas, for Ted Ginn, you spread, if you're Sean Payton and Pete Carmichael, you spread the Panthers defense east to west. You move around Kamara and Thomas and Ginn, make Carolina account for all of them, and now all of a sudden you're thin between the tackles, and that's Mark Ingram time. So I really like the Saints backs. I really favor the Saints running backs in this situation.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about receiving core versus receiving core. Who has the advantage there?
I think, again, it's clearly New Orleans, but it's not because of it's not because of the talent that New Orleans has. It's because of the zero talent that Carolina has. I like Devin Funchess as a receiver. I do not like him as a number one receiver. Number 2 or 3 option at best. Remember when Marshawn Lattimore has yet to play against the Carolina Panthers. He did not play against them in either game this year. And Funchess had a decent effort in both outings, but that also tells me Lattimore could have by all accounts, Lattimore could have suited up against Carolina in their last meeting. He was still coming back from that ankle injury. The Saints themselves chose to rest Lattimore, and that tells me they realize that the guys that they have other than that are more than capable of covering Carolina's receivers and passing game. And Michael Thomas, I don't think anybody can dispute that Michael Thomas has to be considered one of the 5 or 7 best wide receivers in all of the NFL right now. And we've talked all night and for weeks now about how the Saints receiving core isn't what it once was because those other guys aren't stepping up. But you give me Michael Thomas, and you're going to have a decent passing game. So I'll favor the Saints there too.
Well, we got to remember Michael Thomas set an NFL record, man. Had more receiving catches than any one of their first 2 seasons in the National Football League. I think he broke Jarvis Landry's record that he set a few years ago. So, and think about it. I was thinking, man, wouldn't that have been Odell Beckham? But no. Look at what the Saints have done. This is Drew Brees' first. I can't believe this. First Pro Bowl wide receiver. Can you believe this? And now he sets history. Oh, man, it's just outstanding to see what's going to come of this young man in his career as a New Orleans Saint. All right, so let's talk about the lines, the battle between, and really the battle that really controls the destiny of both of these teams. How can the Saints offensive line versus the Panthers defensive line, who has the upper hand there?
That's a tough one, and honestly, that might be the matchup of the game. We all like to talk about the glamour positions and the glamour players, the Kuechly's, the quarterbacks, the Camaras, the Tomasia, et cetera. But this game is going to be one up front, and it's going to be one based off of Saints offensive line versus Carolina's defensive line. We talked about what may or may not happen if Armstead can suit up, but even if he doesn't, the Saints have a Pro Bowl caliber center in Max Unger, a very underrated right guard in Larry Warford, and I know you love him as a player too. Ryan Ramczyk is an outstanding rookie right tackle, and I really like the cohesiveness that this Saints line has. Having said that, Carolina has one of the scariest defensive lines in the entire NFL. You mentioned Julius Peppers. And he's a veteran, well past his prime, but he still had 11 sacks this season. Carolina does an outstanding job of utilizing him in pass situations only. And Mario Addison is he's a very underrated defensive end and has another 11 sacks. Interior, Carolina has two terrific and stout defensive tackles in Starla Toule, and I apologize if I mispronounced his name, and K'Wan Short. And they also have Vernon Butler there to provide some depth as well. So they're a deep, talented, physical defensive line. This is going to be the battle of the game. And since we don't know what kind of health Armstead is going to be in if he plays, I'm actually going to give a slight edge to Carolina. I don't know if I give them an advantage enough to win the game based off of that. But I think Carolina's defensive line is going to be a handful.
Yeah, and I can see where you're coming from, Bob. The way to neutralize an aggressive defensive line is to push them off their blocks. That means running the ball down their gut. It's like body punches, guys. If the Saints can hit enough body blows, that can soften them in the third and fourth quarters. I think that's why it was so key that you say, can Sean Payton stay patient with the run? Right there. If we can go into battle and hit hit those 5-yard runs, 6-yard runs, or break a couple 10-yarders or whatever, because we have the tools and resources to do it. Can we be able to block them effectively? That first and second quarter is going to really be the telltale sign of how we're going to do and perform throughout the rest of the game. All right, let's talk about one last thing that we're really going to have to pay attention to. Drew Brees, not versus Cam Newton, but Drew Brees versus the Carolina linebacking core. Who has the advantage? Tell me.
That's another big matchup because we know how talented all three of Carolina's linebackers are. Shaq Thompson is extremely athletic. Thomas Davis is a veteran and kind of a Saints killer through his career. He's been doing this a long time and still playing at a high level. And Luke Kuechly, my God, is there a team in the NFL that wouldn't trade half of their draft just to get a Luke Kuechly on their team? He's probably the best all-around linebacker in the NFL, and more so than these guys are great against the run, are also very athletic against the pass. And I mentioned before, I kind of quipped that they wouldn't be able to keep up with Kamara. Well, that's no insult on them. Nobody has been able to keep up with Kamara. Right. The thing that concerns me about Carolina's linebackers is they're so smart, combined with their athleticism, and they read the quarter, Kuechly especially, and you pointed this out earlier, Kyle. Kuechly does an outstanding job of reading the opposing quarterback and the diagnosing plays, and he drops into this passing lane so quick and he can make the plays once he's there. He's not just there to take up space. So Drew is going to have to be able to move them off their mark, and he does. Breeze is maybe the best in the game, or if he's not the best, he's second only to Tom Brady. He moves people with his eyes and his head. I love watching Breeze go through his progressions, when he has time to do so, because you see him move safeties and move linebackers with just a quick twitch here or there, and it's subtle but noticeable. Breeze is a veteran. I'm going and a Hall of Famer. He's going to walk into the Hall of Fame 5 years to the day after he retires. You got to give the edge to a Hall of Famer, still playing maybe not at the highest level of his career, but still playing at a high level. Drew is going to know what he needs to do against those guys to make just enough plays to win. And as long as the Saints team and the Saints offense isn't put in a position where Drew feels like he has to make plays, where he can just take what the defense gives him and get the ball into the hands of his best players, I'll give Drew the advantage there.
Yeah, definitely. The play action fake is going to be the most important play for this team coming up on Sunday. If the Saints are going to set the tone, run the ball, if they continue to have success doing so, then we know the play action fake is going to be successful in the long run. And some of those screen passes, I just know this one thing, Bob, and you can correct me on this if you want, man. They're going to have to limit those 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage, bubble plays, screen passes. It's not going to work against this team. They've seen it enough from the New Orleans Saints. We saw it last game. They responded and tagged our offensive guys time and time again. I just think, Sean Payton, this is not the game for it. So that's just my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know. Okay. Okay, guys, and let's kind of go defensively. Our defensive line against the Carolina offensive line. Who has the advantage there?
I think hands down. I mean, the Saints, again, are back to struggling a little bit at the defensive end position opposite Cam Jordan. Alex Okafor got hurt first, and he was having a terrific season. And then Aoli Kikaha got hurt. Very good pass rusher. Not an every down player, but still he was having a decent season in his own right. And Trey Hendrickson, another member of this outstanding rookie class, was starting to come along when he hurt an ankle. He's missed the last, I think, 3 or 4 games, and he's questionable coming into this game. Now, George Johnson, they signed off the street. He has played terrific football in the last month or so. And he and Cam, even with as much success as Jameis Winston was having passing the ball last week, it wasn't due to lack of pressure from Cam Jordan, who we know is going to bring his A game. But George Johnson was bringing some nice quarterback pressures from the other side too. So I don't like how thin they are at defensive end now, but I think those two players are capable of making some plays. And inside, Sheldon Rankins is playing the best football that I've seen him play in his short 2-year career so far. He's really stepping up. David Onyemata is coming along, as is Tyler Davison. I said it clear back in training camp that I really liked the Saints defensive line. And the Panthers have had a hard time protecting Cam. They've given up 35 quarterback sacks on the year. Meanwhile, the Saints have, I think, 40 or 42 sacks, and the bulk of them coming, from their defensive line. The Panthers' offensive line has had a hard time opening holes up consistently and protecting Newton. So really, I don't think it's close. I think the Saints' defensive line has a distinct advantage here.
All right, good stuff, man. Good stuff. I think let's talk about the coaches. Coaches versus coach. Who has the advantage?
I know we were talking about Sean Payton versus Sean Payton, and we kind of joke about it every now and then. And it's a legitimate worry whether Coach Payton, can be patient and stick to, as Bum Phillips once said, you dance with who brung you.
Yeah.
If Payton can stick to what has been successful for the Saints offense, that's always the question with him. We say all that, and I know Coach has his critics, and I've always been a big supporter on the flip side of that. You look at his success in the playoffs. His teams really step it up when they get to the postseason. And yes, I know that they've only won one Super Bowl, but even the playoff games that they have lost, they have played well. They have fought till the end. You can better believe that a Sean Payton team is going to fight to the death in a playoff game. Now, on the other side, Ron Rivera, again, you look at Carolina's playoff record. The Panthers, I'm hard-pressed to think of, other than the Super Bowl against Denver where they came out flat for whatever reason. Carolina will always give you their A game in the playoffs. That we know what kind of physical team that Ron Rivera teams will always have. And they'll fight you to the death as well. I'm gonna go Homer here. I'm gonna take my coach because he's my coach, but by the slimmest of margins. I think even if you're a Sean Payton critic, you have to have confidence in what he has done in the past when he's had playoff opportunities.
Okay. How do you see Cam Newton faring against our defense?
I see him making a lot of mistakes. In the passing game, Cam Newton is not a pure quarterback, and he's struggled with accuracy his whole career. He threw 3 interceptions against New Orleans in their first matchup, and he didn't even end up finishing the game. They ended up sitting them. Now the Saints were blowing them out of their own building then. Cam did not have a great outing in the rematch in New Orleans. If he and we know this about Cam, if he gets flustered, if you pressure him early on, or things don't go well for him early, his entire game unravels quickly. And that's, the Saints know this, and the Saints and Dennis Allen brings the type of defensive pressure, precisely the type of defensive style that frustrates Newton, like we just talked about. I don't see Cam having a good game at all.
Wow. That would be great news for us if he does not. So, interesting, Bob. And I just think when it comes down to whenever this game ends, if it's 6:30, 7 o'clock range, Central Standard Time on Sunday, the New Orleans Saints will prevail. But we're going to prevail also because of the energy and the passion that's going to be in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome for the New Orleans Saints with our fans. And that's the one intangible that's going to be the key. But another intangible, our Mr. Thomas Morstead is going to have to really give us some really good field position advantages against the Carolina Panthers, man. I mean, he's going to have to put them between the 15 or even between the 10 and the goal line on a couple of instances, so they will have to drive down the field. And we know the likelihood without a solid passing game for those guys is going to be very difficult for Cam Newton. But whoever spies on Cam Newton, I think that's going to be Craig Robertson. He's going to have to do a very good job not getting caught up with some of those down the field blocking assignments that some of the guards are going to have when they need to pull. And also some of our defensive tackles can't get overly aggressive and allow Cam Newton some running room as well. So let's just see how this transpires, man. Bob, it's going to be an exciting game, of course, because it's an NFC South opponent, but it's also going to be one of those thrilling games, I believe, when we said everything after Sunday evening. All right, man. just right quick before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the listeners that what to expect, or any other keys that are out there for the listeners to kind of be watching during the game?
Yeah, I mean, look for this. We talked about how Peyton likes to motivate his guys, and how they remember this too. They always like to do something a little bit different come playoff time, and especially with an opponent that knows them so well and that they know so well. So I expect. Here's a bold prediction for you. Alvin Kamara will throw a touchdown pass this game.
Wow, really?
Yeah. He's done. The man has done everything else. He looks like he's going to be the regular kickoff returner, at least through the playoffs and in big situations. I mentioned earlier that I expect him to see. I expect to see him on at least a couple of punt return opportunities as well. With his exciting open field ability. The only thing the man has left to do is throw a touchdown pass on a halfback option. That's going to be my bold prediction for this game, is that Alvin Kamara will throw a touchdown pass.
Wow.
Mark it down. I wouldn't put any money in Vegas if I were you, but mark it down and come back to me and say, Bob, you were right if it happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I agree with you, Kyle. I think it's going to be a nail biter. When I said that Cam wasn't going to have a good game, I should have been more specific. I meant throwing the ball. I think that they're going to let him put the responsibility of this offensive success on his legs. He is, even if the Saints play well defensively, Cam is too athletic not to make plays with his legs. So I think that he's going to get some opportunities in the open field as well. Carolina and New Orleans games are always played pretty tight and very physical matchups. I am going to pick the Saints to win it 24-20, but I'd be lying if I said that this game didn't worry me.
Yeah, it's a concerning game, and I don't want anyone to believe that it's going to be a cakewalk whatsoever. I just think the intangibles have to be in place, and then, of course, Bob, we can't have big mistakes, man. We cannot have those turnovers, and praying they won't be there, and praying that if they were there, it's not going to be at a critical time and juncture in the football game. And let's quickly and guys, I believe the Saints are going to win. And Bob, I got a little bit tighter, man. I think it's going to be one of those kick games. I think Will Lutz is going to be the very key for us as well, man. I think it may be one of these 19 to 14 type of games, something to that nature. It's going to be really, really, hey, who can really put it out there? I wouldn't say 19. Let me say 24 to 17, something like that. So it's going to be a close game, man. But we can't overlook these guys whatsoever. All right, with the other wild card games, do you have Atlanta over the Rams? Are you going to stay with that prediction?
You know what? I am going to pick Atlanta over the Rams.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, like I said, I said earlier in the night why I thought Atlanta could win, and I said that, but I thought Los Angeles would win. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to go out on another limb and say Atlanta is going to win that game because they've been playing some good football in the last month.
Okay. Tennessee over Kansas City or Kansas City over Tennessee?
God, I hate the Kansas City Chiefs. And I have zero confidence in Andy Reid coached playoff teams. But I do think Tennessee is just not quite there yet. They're putting a nice football team together. And I had actually picked them to make the playoffs in my preseason predictions. But I'm going to go with Kansas City is going to win this game.
Okay, and we got one of Sean Payton's disciples, Mr. Marone, over in Jacksonville, seeing his old squad, the Buffalo Bills, coming into town. Will the Jags be able to prevail?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I love Doug Marone. I always have. And Jacksonville is an exciting young team to watch, and you want to talk about a scary good defense too. I don't think Buffalo has enough horses, horses to stay in this race. That could be your biggest blowout of the wild card weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, man, because think about it. Shady McCoy, he is gimpy right now, and they are not sure that he's going to be available for the game. So without Shady McCoy back there, and we saw how that Bills defensive line is so suspect against the run, Leonard Fournette could have a really good game, he and as well as Chris Ivory.
Yeah, and people come down on Blake Bortles really hard. I've heard national media who was finally starting that. Now, don't get me wrong, Blake Bortles is not going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback anytime soon. But he's played some solid football this year. And a couple weeks ago when they went into San Francisco on the road against a 49ers team that finished the season very, very well, might I add, and they lost a shootout. A shootout. And I think Bortles threw for over 300 yards. I think he had a couple interceptions, but it's not like he stunk the joint up. And all of a sudden, everything that was going wrong in the world near Jacksonville, Florida, was all the fault of Blake Bortles again. So that's an interesting dynamic going on there. I don't think Jacksonville has the good enough play at quarterback to knock off New England or Pittsburgh. But I think Bortles is better than a lot of people think, and certainly he's going to be enough to get him past the Bills.
Yeah, they've been knocking on him, and I heard him in the press conference today say he's been used to that ever since college days with O'Leary. He said he was benched every other day in college right. with O'Leary, so he's used to the knocks, as well as every time someone calls him trash, like Clowney did a few weeks ago, and I think the young man from Tennessee just said some negative things about him on radio yesterday. Blake Bortles seems to respond when it comes to this. So they have a really good, solid cast behind them. I believe it's going to be the running game that's going to really set the tone against the Buffalo Bills and help them to be able to move on in the wild card to the divisional round. All right, man. Bob, it's been a pleasure, as always, to have you on the air. I really want the people to follow you. Tell them how they can be able to follow you on social media as well as in the media.
Well, and thank you again, Kyle. I always appreciate the opportunity. I love being a member of the family. It is truly an honor. But Saints Nation and any football fan for that matter, you can follow my work at the Canal Street Chronicles. We have a Facebook page, and we can also be followed on Twitter at Saints CSC. You can also follow me personally. My Twitter account is BobbyR2613, and I have my own personal Facebook page as well under Bob Rose. I'm pretty active. I'd like to think I'm pretty interactive in all the Saints message boards, especially on Facebook. I like to post my articles there. Barry Hurstis and I and my boss at Canal Street, John Hendricks, we are all very interactive with the fans. So please, strike up a football conversation with us. Talk to us, ask questions. If you're curious about something, that's what we're there for. We're not experts by any means, but we just. We write and we follow the team that we all love. So I'll try to help out wherever I can, and I love to talk football.
Yes, he is an expert. Do not let Bob fool you. Okay. The New Orleans Saints are going to face their nemesis in the NFC South on Sunday afternoon, and it's going to be a good one, Who Dat Nation. Don't forget, you can follow Saints News at www.saintsnews.net or at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com. That's where you can find all Barry Hurstis' articles and his featured columns. And you can check us out on Facebook at Saints News, as well as Twitter and Instagram at Saints News. All right, Bob, it's going to be a good one. We're going to talk a little bit later, and we'll talk next week to recap what happens inside of the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. This is Kyle T. Mosley of Saints News Radio, as well as the Crescent City Connection. Please be there, support the team, and, baby, bring home a win, boys, in black and gold. Let's have a good one. Who Dat Nation, you stay classy, baby. Take care.